the Spoken Deed podcast with Dr. Walt Duffy and Matt Duffy. This is episode 3. We're moving along. So I believe Matt has come up with a topic for this week.
It's the new topic struggle. So last week we were talking after the podcast and, still on the topic of sports. And we got on the train of, there's these athletes or I guess people in general for different settings where they talk about when they enter their state of mind for their competition or in the zone or whatever you want to call it, but they'll say they're like a different person when they're on the field, or they have to have a not standard approach to whatever they're doing, and that they can change how they are with their mindset. So I thought that was just an interesting kind of broad topic to get into of how much power, I guess, does your brain really have over what you're capable of doing, and how does your mindset affect how capable you are of getting those outcomes?
Oh, that is very interesting. I'm glad you used the word enter, because I was thinking about this just a little bit earlier today, because you just brought up the topic last night as we were talking again. And I started thinking about roads and highways, freeways, interstates, and I'll add more to that as we go along. But people often read that we use what percent of our brain power, our mind, maybe 10%.
Yeah, I think it's since been debunked, but
that was the whole thing.
Yeah.
But you do have a large capacity to probably use more than we do, and we do know that people can be in certain situations, such as you hear about somebody that was able to lift a car off somebody, or to just do quote unquote like superhuman things where they would never been able to do that in a different type of situation. And we know that people will meet like an athlete or somebody else, and they say, well, when I saw them out there, they seemed like this, When I met the person in real life, they must have been an actor out there playing, because in real life they're sort of shy, reserved, nothing like you saw them out there. And that is not that uncommon at all. I mean, even actors, you hear, oh, that person's shy, would never get up talk in front of other people, but they can get up and act because they're acting like a different person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we do have those various capacities, and different people have different abilities. And then when we get to talk about mental health, I think the power of thought is often talked about. I mean, are you stuck in the negative thought patterns? You talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, or can you get into a positive thought pattern? One thing that we deal a lot with like transcranial magnetic stimulation, we do TMS for people who have treatment-resistant depression. It's very common when you have treatment-resistant depression to have a lot of negative self-doubt, negative thoughts, and I can sit here and tell you, well, just stop it, just turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I digress a lot, folks, so I'm sorry about this. There was a famous sort of Bob Newhart episode, and a lot of you will not know about Bob Newhart, so you can go and Google it. Something I love to do with the students that we have on the back hall, because they have no idea of the references I refer to often. But in a Bob Newhart episode where he sort of played a therapist, and the patient starts talking to him, and if he doesn't like it, he just tells him to stop it. And the brain doesn't really work like that, so it's not always that helpful to tell somebody just to stop it. I mean, they probably would if they could, right?
Yeah.
So that's what will lead into our talking about two-lane roads and interstates and freeways and exits and entrances, because I find the whole thing very fascinating when you start thinking of the brain and the networks within the brain.
So on that, I was thinking as you were talking, and it brought up this thing that I think is becoming even more prominent when people talk about how to succeed at something. And the recommendation now is a lot of times, well, visualize it before you do it. Right? Is that just taking an active approach of convincing your brain it's possible and it's likely to happen versus just going in with maybe doubt to it happening? Is it more the more you think about it as a guarantee or a certainty or even just a possibility, you have a higher likelihood of achieving the outcome you want versus going in with unsure or doubtful or no concept of what the outcome is going to be.
So let's take an example, and I do not know this, but let's say Peyton Manning, the quarterback, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since you like football. And he has a scenario played out in his head. He's playing the championship game.
Mm-hmm.
And he has an idea of what might happen in the fourth quarter. And we're behind by 6 or 7 points, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to score. So is he more likely to accomplish that with his team if he's thought in his mind, well, these are all the things that can go wrong in that scenario. And I just see all these opportunities for miscues. What do you think is going to happen when he hikes, that ball gets hiked to him and he drops back? Do you think he's going to be calm and be able to see all the possibilities that are open on the field?
Probably not.
But if he has rehearsed in his mind, he's already practiced with these receivers many, many times, right?
Yep.
And with his line. If he's already rehearsed in his mind all the potential possibilities, he knows the opposing team, he knows their weaknesses, he knows what they might do, and he has scenarios that even if they don't do what they would usually do, and he's rehearsed those over and over and over again, he has sort of built tracks in his mind that he's hoping at the time he's calm and his mind will just sort of pop up what for him to all look at, right? So he's much more likely to see the potential opening possibility of the person he might be able to throw to in that situation. So he's able to see more of the field. You talk about quarterbacks going through those progressions, right?
Yeah.
And that is a huge learning step for quarterbacks going from like high school to college, again from college to the NFL.
Yeah.
So part of that is, your peripheral vision, being able to know all the possibilities, being sort of these automatic cues being able to pop up in your brain, so you're able to progress through them quickly. Able to choose number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Oh, hey, there's a number 8 that wasn't even supposed to be there, but the possibility was already built into my brain system. So being able to visualize gives you the possibility to then act. What happens sometimes, if you don't practice that in vivo, all of a sudden you get hit with a crisis and anxiety, and that overrides your ability to enact that ability. Does that make sense?
Yeah, now I have lots of thoughts as we're going.
That's the purpose, folks.
Trying to take it away from sports a little bit this time we talked about, right? So, on your highways and roads and everything example, right? One thing I think we're aware of it, but then I think I read something that says, oh yeah, this is actually a thing, where you can drive home every day, and you get home and you go, I don't remember driving at all.
Yes,
right?
You hear people say that. I believe that's happened to me before.
Because it's something where repetition, your brain starts to only look for differences. So if you're driving the same route every day, then your brain goes, oh, I can focus on something else, and just subconsciously the eyes are still working, I'll pay attention to the eyes if something's different.
Yeah. This has happened actually, I would say to the majority of physicians when they were on call going through residency, and sometimes even afterwards. Sometimes you work lots of hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for example, when I first came to the town we live in, I was taking 2 different sets of call, and I was running a full-time outpatient practice, and sometimes I would have to take 2 types of call in 1 week.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're tired and you don't have much sleep. And you come into work the next day and they said, oh, God, thank you, Dr. Duffy, for taking our call last night and giving us orders and stuff. And it takes you a minute. Did I really do that or did I not do that? So those types of things really, really do occur.
And I've had situations where I'm driving to work, but it's a weekend, right? And I'm supposed to be going somewhere else, but I'm taking the same start of the route. So my brain starts paying attention to something else, and then I go, oh, I'm not supposed to be at work right now, but I'm halfway to work or 3/4 of the way on the normal route, but I was supposed to take a turn, 4 blocks back to go a new direction.
Yeah, I do that. I pick your grandma up for church every Saturday night. I go a certain way, one route, and every so often she has something going on with one of my sisters, and so she's not coming with me. But about 50% of the time, I still end up at her house because my brain that's the way it's supposed to go.
So tying it back, another thing. So that's a really strong network that if you get into, your brain just wants to go on autopilot.
Yeah, network, you have a habit built into that network, right? We talk about 21 days to build the habit. Yeah.
And even if you access them, like I can leave the house going, oh, I know I need to go somewhere new. But once I get onto that highway, my brain just likes to keep me on the highway, right? Because it's, we're doing repetition.
Right.
So, slightly pivoting.
But let's stay on that topic just a second because it's really important. So, on the way to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually you don't have to make yourself go to work. You're at a job. And
you might need to make yourself go to work, but
but your 21 days, you're able to get that in pretty easy,
mm-hmm.
right? But to change a habit or to change a new way of thinking, like to get up and exercise every day when you've never been exercising, to do that 21 days straight, there's many more failures for people than successes, right?
Yeah.
You might have to do it multiple times. Quitting smoking can take multiple times to get the number of days in. So the bigger of a change, when you have these changes, whether they're positive or negative, to get that built into your system is very difficult because we know that intermittent reinforcement can be the most strong. So maybe you mean to exercise, but you only get it done like 4 out of the 7 days.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden in your mind, I failed, right? So it's very hard to keep it going. That's why so many treadmills are clothes hangers. That's what they're used for. So, so as we go along, these things they're easy to talk about, but they're very difficult
hard
to
to do,
implement.
right?
Yes.
So, but eventually they're easy to implement when they're habit, right?
If you keep them
If
going.
you keep them going, right?
Yes.
Like you drive to work every day. Well, most days of the week, so
Yes.
you're keeping it going. So another way that happens that we talk about is muscle memory. Right? If you can get into things that are muscle memory, you can repeat them without having to actively think through the process. People talk about riding a bike, right? When you first start, I got to push the pedal, I got to keep the balance, all these variables are going through your head. But once you know it, you can get more or less on the bike for life, and your brain just kicks into this is the process, and we can go. So, but you only get there through repetition, right? You have to get on that bike every day for 4 weeks or however long it takes to build that memory in your muscles of what to do. So the question then that popped up in my brain is, is visualization working muscle memory in the brain? Because your brain isn't a physical moving part, right? Its muscle memory is just going through the process. So if you can make your brain believe that whatever's going on is going on.
What do you mean it's not a moving part?
Like when I lift a weight, right? There's an actual muscle that's moving, right? Your brain's not a muscle, right? So
but you're getting feedback. You're getting visual feedback, right?
Right.
From your arm.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing it move.
Yeah.
When you move your brain,
Mm-hmm.
you're not getting the visual feedback, are you?
Depends, right? That's how good can you get in visualization? Because
there you go. Okay.
How often do you wake up from a dream because you're falling, and you fully believe you're falling until you give your brain a different area of feedback to go, oh no, that's not what's happening. So if you can, I mean, people talk, yeah, I can visualize and I can make myself. I mean, there's some people, I don't know if this one's true, but they say I can work out less because I can. What's the type of dreaming where you know what's happening? Essentially, they can put their brain into a state and say, I'm working out, and I can convince my body it's working out. So I get a little bit of benefit because my body's feeling the stress, so it's upping the metabolism. They're not getting bodybuilder bodies doing it because you're not building the muscle, but they think they get a little bit of extra by not doing anything but sitting there and putting their body through the perceived stress of what it would experience if they were doing it.
Right. Well, I think the thing that you brought up that I found fascinating is that sort of the muscle memory and visual, where you can see it, where maybe the people who are able to visualize what they want to happen with their brain and the thought process, they're sort of able to change it into a muscle memory type of exercise, which we are more comfortable with. It's more easy for us to grasp because we grow up like that, and it's easier to get that to stick that way because our brain, over the years, that's how we have repeatedly taught our brain to operate, through muscle memory. The other thing you brought up was like riding a bike. So then where I take it is riding a bike is a pretty gross motor. You don't have to hit the pedal every time to make it go. People don't have to pedal the same way. Some people put their toes on, some put their heels on, and you can get it going. But then I thought back, and sometimes I've played pickleball. We've talked about that in the past, where you have a racket and you have to serve. And I remember sometimes, hey, you play that several days in a row, and that becomes a habit. But you know what? If you don't play it year in and year out, all of a sudden you serve, you can miss it a couple times, and all of a sudden you start to question yourself. And all of a sudden this thing that's really pretty darn easy, you start thinking about it when you're doing it, and it can become very difficult. And all of a sudden you can sort of lose the skill, or it sort of becomes hidden. And that's also what happens to people who might be depressed or anxious. You might see somebody who, when they're not feeling depressed or really anxious at the time, their thought process clicks along, they're very positive, they can go. When they are depressed, their brain becomes very slow, it's just not working like they want it to. All of a sudden all these negative thoughts creep in, and once those happens, that brain can easily change lanes. And it can be very difficult for them to move it back to the positive lane. So it sort of works. It's harder to get it on the positive and stay there. It's very easier for your brain to shift over to the negative side and then make you work to get back over to the positive side.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to a few different places. But
We are.
I'll stay on this one for a moment. And challenge it a little bit, but...
That's all right. That's what it's about.
A purpose, right? So, you say it's easy for your brain to fall into the negative, right?
For some people.
For some people. Because we also know that there's people who are really good at not falling into the negative.
Oh, they really do not have good insight, or they're very good at discounting the negative, even if it might be good for them.
Or there's people who hate high stressful situations. I'm the most effective because you put me in a non-stressful situation, I don't know what to do. Right? They're almost better in the negatives, but they're not letting them go into a negative thought process. They're just more effective working in those scenarios to some degree. So the question then is it really that the positive or negative is the issue, or is it, your highway, you built your brain to divert to that highway because that's where all your muscle memory, your default, your visualization of what you do in certain situations, you go, if this happens, I'm going to feel this way. And the more you reinforce your brain to say, yes, this is the way we go when this happens, then it's harder to in that moment consciously go, oh no, we want to pull the car the other way. Because you've reinforced, you've built the muscle memory of, well, this is the thought process I have in that situation.
Again, not a one answer will not solve the issue. So you have our everyday life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. You train yourself to be comfortable operating in a certain mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're a lifelong career soldier.
Yep.
You're a command sergeant major in the Army. I was in the military, so I talked about this a little bit, but you're used to operating in high stress environments, people responding to you, and you need to be on the go. And all of a sudden, you hit retirement age.
Mm-hmm.
So you're told now you have to retire, and you haven't really planned for that too well. So now you don't have that same sort of stress going on in your life, but your body is craving that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we used to see this also in military families. People would deploy, and then they would come home, and you're supposed to operate at a different pace, right? That can be incredibly different because you have built it into your system. Now, do you naturally gravitate towards that system because of who you are, partly genetically and partly how you've grown up and just how you built those highways out? And now you're being able to switch. Now, some people are very comfortable. They've learned over time. They, like on the football field, I can operate this way on the field, up on stage, and off that, I'm just a completely different person, and I'm very comfortable doing those two things.
Mm-hmm.
Other people are not. But then it's a different thing, say, that you're used to operating very, very fast, and you're going.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's not retirement, but your brain has developed some issue, like a traumatic brain injury, long COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got really depressed, and it is forced out of its lane. And not only the forced out of its lane, but you do not have an entryway to it right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's close to you, and you can't get to it. So what does that do to that person at that time? So
So that's. I'm going to circle back to that one because I want to go to one more first, and then I want to end on that one because I think that's where we're going maybe next time. So, what there's evidence in healthcare, right? Bringing it back into the healthcare arena, is I don't know how, where in the research it is, but they've shown that for outcomes, hope really matters. And hope can also be phrased as when something negative happens, I have a belief that it's going to become positive. So I keep my brain on this track of positivity in some way versus falling into the negative.
So, folks, as we go along, I'll call them brain farts. I just get these, so I throw them out. So I would say, to some degree, hope can be the strongest dope that's available.
Positive dope or
negative?
positive? Okay.
Yeah, positive dope. I mean, to some degrees, hope can give you lead to the best positive outcomes.
Yeah. No, I believe that a lot of that isn't just I'm hopeful, right? It's, I'm hopeful so I follow my treatment plan. I'm hopeful so I'm compliant. I'm hopeful so I eat better. I'm hopeful so I do other things that have positive impact.
Well, yeah, so your thing there is I have hope, now do I take action on that hope,
Mm-hmm.
right, to reinforce it?
Yeah.
Or I'm a hopeful person, but I hope I win the lottery, but I'm not going to buy the lottery ticket.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's hope, and then does the hope lead to you being willing to follow through on things that may be difficult,
Yes.
right? But then what you were mentioning, which I think is maybe interesting for a full episode, is you're hopeful, right? Even if I'm hopeful, well, I see the highway, but I can't get on, right? I think the question, I don't think this is answerable maybe, but it becomes the question of, I know how to throw a ball, right? My muscle memory is there. My muscle memory doesn't matter the second I break my arm, because there's now something outside of my control that's preventing me from doing what I know how to do. So within the brain, when you have a mental illness or a concussion or a TBI or those things, is it something that we can say is similar to there's something actually preventing someone's being able to access? So it's not just they're choosing not to or they can't, but there's something actually potentially impeding their ability to do maybe what even their muscle memory has built them up to do.
Very interesting conversation, because I would add a caveat to that. So you would say that broken arm, right, is preventing you. I would say that you've just now added a tollway to be able to get your arm better.
Yeah, eventually it could come back.
Yeah.
Right? But in that moment, when it's dislocated,
yeah,
I can't force it to throw because I don't have the ability to get it to do that.
Most of the time, that's correct. Not all the time, but most of the time, that would be correct.
Yeah. I mean, there's
people who overcome in those instances that we know of.
Depending on what it is, yeah.
So, but there is something, however you look at it, it's broken in your brain. Do we know the exact thing, the exact root cause of all that all the time?
Yeah, because and this is where I might be talking outside of my scope, but we know it's chemical, right?
Well, now it's,
the question is what causes it.
We've had a lot about chemicals. Now there's a lot about neural networks. How much chemically mediated are each of those networks? Do you have to, so what are you... There's a lot we don't know. The more we know, the more we don't know. I mean, the brain's a very complicated... Brain and mind are very, very complicated. And I think the moment you think you know it and understand it, you have lost.
So maybe knowing's the wrong word, right? Today there's a large belief that one of the things that's significantly impactful is, I think the term is chemical imbalance, right?
Or is it that more and more we're talking about network theories and network imbalance?
So outside of just the specific spot,
like serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, is it more about giving us a specific network online is where a lot of the research is going?
But the network is it
it's
overall
chemically
chemical?
mediated.
Yeah.
Right,
So,
all the network can be chemically mediated. As far as we, understand,
yeah.
currently, yes.
But the back end that still is difficult to answer is what's causing that. It may be chemically mediated and the chemicals are being impacted, but we still today don't know what's causing the chemicals to be impacted.
Oh, yeah, especially on the individual level, right?
Right.
There's not a test that you can go in somewhere. Somebody might tell you there is. That you can walk into an office if you're depressed, bipolar, and say, okay, where in my brain is the exact problem and what is it? And just what's the very specific thing we can do to fix my issue?
Yeah. And even if we get there, right, that's still lacking the step of why. It's like I break my arm, right? I go and I get an x-ray. Someday maybe we'll be able to do an x-ray and say, yeah, your brain's broken the same way your arm's broken. But they can't tell me how my arm broke. I gotta be able to say, I was riding my bike and fell off and hit it on the ground, and that's...
But you and 10 other people could have fallen off the exact same way.
Right.
And
Yeah.
some of
It's
you
not a
might not
guarantee
haven't.
that happens.
Correct. Or you have a different break, right?
Yeah. So what's guaranteed to cause it is another thing. Why does the break happen? Well, why does the why happen? Right. We can go back and back and back. So, but to maybe wrap up this episode, I think what I was getting at, and you can give the final thought from your perspective, is the outlook you decide to give your brain, and the more you put your brain into that scenario, even if you're not in that scenario, has great impact on how you behave when that scenario occurs.
Yes, it can have a great deal of impact what occurs.
If I look and say, every time this happens, I'm going to get anxious, my likelihood of being anxious when it happens, because I've told myself this is how I'm going to react. So the more I reinforce that, then when it occurs, I'm likely to follow what I've told myself will happen, more so than being able to change it in the moment.
Especially if at the start you're able to visualize being anxious and overcoming that anxiety in that situation. You sort of have to pair it with the emotion, not just the practice. You have to do both.
So if I don't want to be anxious in a situation I'm always anxious in, I can do some work to say, I know that I can put myself visually in it, say, I know the emotion's going to come, and then tell myself how I'm going to handle it. So then,
The only part about that I don't like is tell myself I'm not going to be anxious. You do not have a
not
you
be
do not think
anxious,
of it.
but how I'm going to handle being
Yes,
anxious.
yeah, because to say I'm not going to be anxious, you've lost it. You know, most likely you are going to be anxious.
This is how I'm going to respond to it.
Yeah, how you're going to respond to
The
it.
likelihood that I will take the response I want
Yeah.
is higher because I've already trained my brain to hop on that highway and just do it naturally in the moment versus trying to course correct when I'm being pulled in another direction.
So part of the next episode, because you will not let me get to it, is
Staying on course.
no.
We're on a highway. We'll
It's
go
fine.
on another
No,
highway.
it's really developing the traffic. So what I'd like to talk about a little bit is electric vehicles and roads as part of the episode, because it gives you, people need a visualization of what we're trying to talk about.
Mhm.
And to do that, we have to build sort of the network for them that we're going to go off of. Okay?
All right.
It's sort of like the train set. Well, it's going to be the road set, and we'll use. And there's a very specific reason for using electric vehicles. It's not because I'm enamored with electric vehicles, although it is sort of cool. But they're only as good, especially self-driving electric vehicles.
Mhm.
So, because they can have issues. In fact, we know they have issues currently, but they have a lot of possibilities to them too, right? So, I would like to touch on that a little bit,
We can go on that, and
and then whatever
that
else
was
you
at the
want.
end of the episode, right? Because then we can say one. Because you brought up trains, and people like to talk about one-track minds.
Correct.
Because trains are, you can't, when they're on the track, that's where they're going.
Well, not
But
unless they come up to where you have a.
But the track's already
bifurcation.
pre-built, right? Where
Yeah,
we're
but
talking
some-
about cars and driveways, and maybe you have more control over that one-track mind isn't a train. You're a one-track on a road, and you have a little bit more control than maybe sometimes
Maybe.
we think we have.
Maybe. Well, I think that should wrap this up. We've found that some of these episodes we can get talking and talk forever. So we appreciate you stopping by and listening to us on Spoken D. We're trying to add a little color. We got Matt to add a little bit of color to himself this time, so he didn't become one with the wall. And we look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.